So we're now going to move on to Graham Ward's involvement in the prosecution of Lee Castleton, who was a former subpostmaster at the Marine Drive Post Office branch and was now famously depicted by Will Mellor in the Mr Bates versus the Post Office drama that aired on ITV, when he was trying so hard to understand what had actually happened, what he was being accused of, and actually when he went to court, the Post Office won the case against him for the £26,000 roughly, I think, shortfall that they said he was accountable for, which we now know wasn't the case, but also the obscene amount of costs, £300,000, which would literally bankrupt anybody. On Graham Ward's involvement in the case, we do start looking at email chains between Fujitsu and the Post Office, including Graham Ward and Peter Sewell, who we've heard from before, where they're almost congratulating themselves on their appearance in court, although the judge has reserved judgment on it because there appears to be some troubling testimony offered as part of the Post Office case from Fujitsu, which is referring to an other events log. Nobody appears to know the name of it or necessarily what it contains, although they have confirmed its existence. And the message store, which hasn't been disclosed to Mr. Castleton or his legal team, which they have then obviously requested because it's fundamental part of the case. Without such evidence, this would critically weaken the Post Office's case against Mr. Castleton, and it's now being raised as an issue within Fujitsu and the Post Office, that relationship between them. But shockingly, bearing in mind this case of Lee Castleton's was in 2006, the lessons that could have been learned that could have not only prevented Mr. Castleton from being found guilty wrongly, but also could have prevented any other future sub-postmasters being put through this horrendous ordeal, was missed completely by the Post Office. Let's jump into the inquiry.
Can we just look, please, remembering this, at poll 0008 1910, and look at pages 4 and 5, please. If we can look at them alongside each other, please.
So this looks like another email trail. We know we've heard from Peter Sewell before, Graham Ward's in this, and it's from Stephen Dilly. So let's have a see what questions they've got about this. Looks like one of the cases they were involved in. Ooh, not just one of the cases, the Lee Castleton case by the subject.
Thank you. If we look on the right-hand side first, you'll see an email from Mr. Dilly, dated Friday the 15th of December, to Anne Chambers, and you're copied in. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Many thanks to you and Andy Dunks for attending court to give evidence this week, which was helpful. Judge has reserved his judgment. Thanks also to Brian and his team for providing information about the Falkirk branch at short notice. And then if we scroll down, in litigation, the parties involved have a continuing obligation pursuant to the court rules. And then skipping over 5 or 6 lines, I was also recently told that there was a message store which had everything else on it. And we invited Mr. Castleton to look at it. He didn't take up the opportunity. Whilst giving evidence, that's Miss Chambers, told the court there was also a different sort of events log not included on the message store that we hadn't seen or disclosed for the Marine Drive branch. Mr. Castleton telephoned me today and asked for a copy of this, scrolling down, to be supplied immediately, and then you can read till the rest of the email. Looking at it generally at the moment, we'll come back to Castleton in a moment.
So, that in and of itself, you would presume in Lee Castleton's case, actually is grounds for appeal right there, and that's obviously why the judge decided to reserve his judgment, I'm guessing, in this case, because obviously I'm not a lawyer, but I'm guessing, that is a very valid point. I've not got all the information available. Disclosure has not taken place adequately. This is based off the testimony of the Post Office witnesses themselves who've mentioned other event logs, the message store. And again, this comes back to the heart of training here. When you're not quite sure what is generated or how a system works when you are charged with investigating and auditing these systems, this is how you become unstuck. Because you're referring to things, you're not quite sure what they're called, But the one thing that Mr. Castleton and his legal team are obviously aware of is, whatever you are calling it, we have not seen it. And that is not appropriate, because this should have been disclosed. Hence why there is a disclosure officer assigned to every case.
What was your involvement in the Castleton case?
When was this, 2006? So yeah, I would have been casework manager at that time, so I would have been requesting data on behalf of the civil litigation team that were dealing with it.
And if we take from his own description of casework management that, if we put aside the prettiness aspect for a second, the fonts and the stickers and all that, we check if anything was missing. Well, surely the message store and this other mysterious events log that they are referring to is missing. I mean, it depends what their definition of missing evidence was. It seems to have been, if that's got through, the evidence that we want to present, check none of it is missing. But actually, the definition of missing, is there something not there that ought to be there? And knowing of the existence of this message store and these other event logs that haven't been provided from Horizon, that should have been flagged up, not only by the investigation team, but clearly by the casework management team, as it's hard to conclude other than there was some information in there that either they are completely unaware of and it's baffling to them, or that they didn't want to provide to Mr. Castleton and his legal team.
You would have been the go-between between civil litigation to your right, as it were, and then Fujitsu to your left.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay. This speaks of, can you see, the message store, which had everything else on it. Which seems to be speaking about something in addition to the ARQ data that was obtained.
Yes, it does, yeah.
Do you know what that's referring to there?
No, I don't, no.
Were you aware of a message store which had, quote, everything else on it?
No, I wasn't, no. All I was aware of for ARQ data was we could request transaction logs, event logs that were relevant to the transactions that were conducted at a post office and the events that happened at a post office. And we could further request Horizon System help desk calls.
You had previously been an investigator responsible for disclosure of material in criminal proceedings before this. This is December 2005.
Yeah.
And you're being told, albeit as a copyee on this email, that there is another species of data available in a message store which has been made available to Mr. Castleton. Yes?
Yes, that's correct, yeah.
Is that knowledge that you took forward when you became, or when you were discharging your role as casework manager in criminal cases?
I haven't picked that up.
What about the different sort of events log, which apparently Miss Chambers had referred to in her evidence? Was that something that you didn't pick up?
Yeah, I didn't pick it up, no, not at all.
I mean, it's just unfathomable, the lack of attention to detail. Clearly, there's somebody in the post office that's aware of this message store. It's in a procedure that, albeit was a Fujitsu document that wasn't necessarily sent to the post office. Fujitsu were clearly aware of it. And surely part of prosecution support would be making the post office aware of all data that's available to them. And surely it's within everybody's interests and in the interests of truth and justice to just hand over all that data as Fujitsu to the post office and let them do with it as they see fit, because otherwise they are starting to bear some responsibility if they aren't handing over some of the evidence, regardless of a process in place that could either prove that a crime has been committed or actually prove that it hasn't been committed.
And so does it follow that after this time, December 2005, this wasn't something that you took back to casework management to say, hold on, we're processing all these ARQ requests. There's this other species of data that somebody at Fujitsu and Chambers has mentioned as being important or useful that we're not getting or not asking for.
Yeah. No, I've just not picked it up at all.
And the issue is, because it's in a written record, an email, even if you're only copied in, I mean, you're copied in for your information, it means there's not a reply necessarily expected to it from those that are copied in. But obviously here, that they can say, well, actually, as we've said it in a public hearing in one of your cases, and as we've turned around and written it down in an email, it has actually been provided to you, an employee of the post office, so the post office thus are now aware. The fact that it's not triggered any conversations, because their role, if you take it, is as a security team, is to investigate these issues thoroughly, as they've said in their own words, not pursuing all lines of inquiry and evidence which appears to be easily available and actually part of the Fujitsu process set out for providing such ARQ data requests. Seems mind-bogglingly a mind-boggling oversight on the part of both parties: A, Fujitsu not to provide it if they haven't, and B, the post office not to request it now that they are clearly aware of it because of Lee Castleton's case.